Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello everyone and welcome along to the RTÉ GAA Podcast. Neil McManus is going to be with myself and Rory a little bit later on to chat about the hurling, but Tomás Ó Sé is with us for the first time this season to chat about football with the All-Ireland series starting this weekend. Welcome back, Tomás. And first things first, obviously just coming off the back of your campaign with the Kerry under-20s coming up just short in the All-Ireland semi-final, but it's a tough old nut to crack, isn't it?
It is. Tyrone, those lads certainly
your buddies.
We're not. I haven't slept again last 3 days thanks to the people of Tyrone. So no, they beat us on last Sunday, Jacqui, and probably had that little bit too much firepower for us. They're after turning out 2 or 3 outstanding under-20 teams, and more so than minor level. Under-20s a lot of them tend to make the grade at senior level. So watch out for Tyrone in the next 3 or 4 years. But it was great. It was really enjoyable. I know we'd always be complaining in terms of the time of the year that it's happening, because lads have exams and they're in college and whatnot. But games every week was enjoyable. The buzz, the turnaround was quick. But I think the players enjoyed it. It added that little extra bit to it this year when the new rules were introduced, because I suppose in comparison to the amount of time the seniors would spend detailing tactics and all that, it's a more fluid game at 20 level, and it was enjoyable. It was quick. It was fast. And I think the kick out in particular was the one that jumped out at me as a game changer at that level, and will be at senior club level as well. But all in all, a very good experience again. Disappointing at the end. You'd love to go all the way, but beaten by Tyrone on the day, and they'll take stopping on the way. But there's Mayo and Louth. Louth have had a huge season. I've seen them play. They're outstanding. Whatever's happening up in Louth, whatever's in the water, whatever they're eating above there, it's working. Because there's an awful amount of very good football being played. It's not defensive stuff, and I suppose that's the one area as well with the rules. Yes, there's going to be defensive football. Yes, it's going to be slow, but there is a lot more space. And if you want to go quicker, you can.
Yeah, well, that's the good news, because even we were just kind of chatting off air about when you're in the cold face of it, sometimes we can watch it on TV and say, this is great, this is working great. But like you mentioned things like the kick out, I just wonder how applicable the stuff that we're seeing at senior level, when you're talking about seeing it at under-20s, are you kind of saying, look, lads, embrace it, do all of them? Or are there specific ones that you're targeting, like the kick out, as opposed to maybe saying, like, let's go all out for trying to kick 2-pointers here?
You're just trying to maximize everything that you can. Like, we actually played a challenge game, Jacqui. I won't mention who. It was one of the top counties. We played a challenge game. We absolutely got cleaned out at midfield. I'd say we didn't win 20% of overall kickouts, our own or theirs, yet we won the game. And the say losing kickouts before was a good indicator in terms of what way the game was going to be, or what way it would falter. That isn't there now. I think some of the rules that have been brought in, yes, you mightn't do well on them, but it's an advantage if you can. Like, we played Tyrone last weekend. We did very well at midfield, very well. We had an amount to the ball. You still have to put it over the bar, put it in the net. So I think the fact that the 2-pointer is there, I think the fact that the arc with the kick out is there, I think the fact that it's 11 back, it's still an uphill battle to get the scores if you kind of do very well at midfield. Like, we would focus in on every area as we could, but not to the same level. I see the seniors, and the biggest difference I see between under-20s and seniors is a 2-pointer. The 2-pointer isn't. You can see that the seniors are really the teams that are going after it, and they're doing so well out of it. They're making hay from it, and it's a game changer. The 2-pointer is massive. Had you got 2 or 3 2-pointers the last day, it would change the whole course of the game, and it give you such impetus as well going forward. But every other rule, it was enjoyable. It was you'd approach it differently. I think there's ways around the kick out. Everybody's saying that the kick out has to be up in the air. You can set up the kick out in a way that is giving you the best advantage. Galway recently, I saw them above in Connacht, and they worked it very well. They dominated it. But what they're doing is, instead of, and we saw managers giving out ad lib at the start, oh, it's dangerous and it's just a scrum out there. Teams are going to develop and they're going to get better at it. And now you'll see, instead of 4 or 5 jumping for it, you'll see 2 or 3 jumping for it. And they're trying to isolate one-on-ones to give yourself the best chance of getting under that break or putting a lad under a ball that can field it. And we're seeing with a young lad the last day, he caught 6 clean balls from wing forward. So that skill is coming back into the game. And look, we mightn't all agree with it. But it's easier to watch than giving a short dink 10, 15 yards.
Yeah, here. Well, let's move on to the All-Ireland Series then, and what we might get this weekend. We've got 4 games to kick it all off. Galway against Dublin, which I think for everybody is probably the highlight of the weekend. Kerry, Roscommon, Mayo, Cavan and Clare Down. So let's start with that big one on Saturday night, Galway, Dublin. I think, Tomás, you'd nearly forget how significant that victory was for Galway last year. Like, I was looking back on it. It was the first time they'd beaten Dublin in the championship for 90 years. And when you think about the trajectory of both teams and what Galway, the journey they've been on over the last number of years, that was such a big milestone for them to climb. And then you look at just how big favourites they are against a Dublin team now. It's amazing what one victory can do for a team in terms of their trajectory.
It's huge. I suppose there's a desperate hunger in Pádraig Joyce's Galway. They're knocking on the door the last number of years. They've become very, very close. You'd have to say that there's only one thing that will satiate anybody in Galway, knowing Joyce anyway, is an All-Ireland. And I'd say that's what this team are driving at. I think it was a huge one to get over Dublin last year. A massive one. But I think everybody's in agreement that Dublin aren't the team that they were. It was like we lost to Tyrone a few times and we beat them down in Killarney, but it wasn't the same Tyrone team that you met down in Killarney that was there through the noughties. Players move on, and look, they had it wasn't just one team with Dublin. You had a team in the early, or just starting the decade 2010, 2011, but then you had fellas joining up like Fenton, and they just had about 30 to 35 top-end players over a period of 12 or 13 years, and they worked it so well, they managed it so well, but those players are leaving, and that victory last year for Galway, albeit people mightn't have given Galway the same chance. Maybe this year they'll be getting more of a chance against Dublin, especially what's after happening in Leinster. But ultimately, Galway will be looking at this group, and I think they'll have a serious hunger to make sure that they top that group and get through to the straight quarter final. Because I'd imagine they're desperate hungry for it, but there's probably a pressure on them to deliver in All-Ireland as well now in Galway, and that's a good thing to have. They have absolutely dominated Connacht, and it's something that Mayo had a grip on. So they've come in and they've dismantled that. They're ruling the roost up there, and now the next step for them, and has been, in fairness, last year you would imagine that an All-Ireland was the end game as well, but that's definitely the target here. But they beat Dublin last year, and the way things are at the minute for Dublin, the struggles that they have, I think Dublin will be under pressure against Galway, a Galway team that are physically very dominant and playing well at the moment.
We can talk about Dublin in a minute, Rory, but I do just wonder, in terms of what Tomás is saying about that Galway team, the pressure that they're under, because everybody will know that they're favourites and people expect them to beat Dublin, and that is a different kind of pressure than they were dealing with at this point last year.
It is, but I think like they're a seasoned team, and at a certain point you have to accept that, and you probably have to embrace it, and you probably just need to get on with it. I mean, like they're saying it's going to be close to a full house sellout in Salthill. They're at home. In many ways, it's nearly the perfect game for Galway. Like, if you look at Kerry's situation, where they're playing Roscommon team that seems to have, I don't know, their form has completely gone off the boil. if you're coming off the major high of winning a provincial title, there's nothing to focus the mind and bring you back down to earth than the prospect of the Dubs coming to town and all the glamour and the glitz that they bring. So I think they'll be quietly really looking forward to this. There's the thing about Galway, because they've been on the road for so long as well, there isn't a huge amount of mystery about them anymore. We kind of know who will tog out, bar unless Shane Walsh is fit and maybe Comer. I don't think Comer's going to make it, but who knows? So we know so much about Galway at this stage, and what we don't know is, have they got the ability to get the big job done? And this is the first step on that road. Whereas with Dublin, for the first time in I don't know how long, we don't know anything at all really about where they are. And that's why it's such a massive challenge for them. And it's why this game is so big, I think, on Saturday. It's really one to, like, the Galway starting 15, you, me and Tomás, if we formed a selection committee, we could nearly pick it.
Yeah.
Could you say the same about Dublin?
No. And listen, this has been the great conundrum for Dessie Farrell, Tomás, because first of all, he hasn't had a full hand to deal with. And also some of those crucial players, not just the retirements. I also mean the likes of Bugler, people who have been mainstays in this group, just not being available. I did hear that they seem to be getting a lot of them back, which would actually make a big difference if they were to take to the field this weekend.
Yeah, and you're not going to write Dublin off. Like there's still an awful amount of quality there. Teams will I think they struggled with their kickouts. Teams will defend strongly enough. I think it comes on when you get to this stage of the year when there's less teams involved and you get to knockout stage, it will come to what basically firepower you have up front and how you can score. And I do think that Dublin, there's no doubt about it, but that they're, call it what you like, transition or whatever, but the fear factor is gone. They're not the same team as they were, and that was only natural. That was always going to happen. It's probably going to take it a little bit of time to regenerate again. That doesn't do anything for Dessie Farrell. Dessie Farrell will have to prepare. They won't be in any way happy with an awful amount of aspects of their game that they lost in Leinster, and they're going to come probably prepared. Is there enough of a kick in them? This is the problem. I'm not sure there is. I'm not sure they have like the same toughness, the same balance, the same potency up front isn't there. And a lot of people will say, you still have Kilkenny. I think Brian Fenton is a huge loss to them. But I like the same players that they're going back to. Is even Con. Con is around a long, long time. And if you're just relying on 2 or 3 or 4 key players to keep you ticking over, I think what the biggest thing I take from Dublin in the last 2 or 3 years is when Dublin were in their pomp, some teams were beaten before they left the dressing room at all. Some teams were actually beaten. Now, when teams actually have that belief and that fear factor is gone, then they're going to play with a lot more confidence against Dublin, and they're going to rattle them that little bit more. And I think that's telling as well. But at the same time, don't get me wrong, I still think that there'll be a tough proposition for Galway, and if Galway are going into it anyway unprepared, they'll be found out. But look, it was only natural. It was going to happen. I don't think this Dublin team will have a say in the All-Ireland this year, and that's just the way it is at the moment for them, and they've dominated. They've been brilliant. They've absolutely been brilliant. I remember talking to I have a good few Dub friends, and you'd never believe them. You'd never actually think, yeah, it's coming to an end, because there was always other players coming, and there was cons, and you say, nah, this is going to keep going. But it does seem to have slowed down, and then they're not putting it together as well as they used to.
I don't think there'll be too many getting violins out just yet, though, Jacqui.
Yeah. That's fair.
Yeah. Could I ask Tomás a quick question, though? Like, if you look at the way football used to be played up until this year, Tomás, like Dublin almost invented, because out of necessity, because most of the teams, if you look at the way defensive football went and that blankets and everyone behind the ball, that was nearly a reaction to Dublin. Dublin had created such a potent force that teams had no choice but to say, look, we have to sit right back deep, smother. And they almost, I suppose, they created this template where they kept everybody very wide and they were very slow and methodical about how they moved the ball from left to right to try and, you know, create those little cracks and create those little openings so that they could, you know, get in for those scores. Now, the game is obviously a lot different. So is there a struggle? I suppose the question is kind of two-ended. Is it a struggle for them to try and now feel their way into this new game? Or is it purely down to personnel?
I think it's a mixture of both. I think they struggled, for example, hugely on their kickouts. Cluxton, who will go down as the greatest goalkeeper of all time, and reinvented the game in terms of his reinvented how goalkeepers play. It's still to this day trying to get short ones off. But in the modern game, if you're kicking it out long and teams have it easier to force up, so Cluxton's short kick out is gone. If you don't have the personnel outside, you look at Galway, the team that they'll be facing, and they have 5, 6 big men out around the middle of the park, and it suits to contest those balls. Yes, Dublin have big men around the middle, and they have the likes of Kilkenny who'll be under breaks. But I still think it's a mixture, Rory. I think it's a mixture of maybe now every team are struggling. There's no team that have it perfected in every aspect of defence, attack, with the new rules. And I think it'll take us still another year for everybody. I think the northern teams are probably that little bit ahead in terms of figuring it out and trying to set up as well as they can defensively and offensively. But to answer your question, I think Dublin are struggling with the new rules in terms of the kick out, and I suppose they were for years, 2012 I think, Donegal came with that solution of how to stop and how to counteract teams legally, it must be said, and you have to give credit where credit's due. Nobody thought of it, so all of these teams, plenty of teams have tried to imitate it and not get it right, and Dublin were the team for years after that. Broke down, didn't if you wanted to play it slow, they could break it down. If you wanted to play it fast, they had the players to do that as well. So I think it's a bit of both. Now, if you don't have the players, Rory, it boils down. If you don't have the players to do either, you're in bother, like. And I think that's the biggest thing that probably will be thrown at Dublin. Like, Dessie Farrell is an unbelievable manager. Dessie Farrell has won at underage level for Dublin, at senior level for Dublin, has produced All-Irelands in the modern game, everything. So it comes back to that famous quote, if you don't have the players, you're not going far. And I think that's caught up with them a small bit, but I think it'll be a mixture of both. It's a mixture of personnel, and it's a mixture of struggling with the new setup and the new rules and what that throws at teams. But I think there's other teams in the mix with that and struggling in the same way as Dublin are.
Yeah, well, that brings me on to my next question about your own county, Kerry, because I think at the start of this, people were wondering how Kerry were adapting to the new rules. Were they going for enough 2-pointers? Were they getting their kick-out structures right? But they do seem, as the championship is going on, that they're answering more of the questions. I just wonder what your sense of where they are in terms of how they're adapting is going and what you're seeing.
Yeah, I think, like, on the 2-pointers, I think it comes to personnel. Sean Shea got a couple of them the last day. David Clifford will always get a couple. They have players that'll kick 2-pointers. I think Kerry probably struggled early on in the league, and they struggled in terms of the way they were playing. And I think at some stage during the league, when the pressure was on, when they had to go up to Tyrone and get the win, I think that was massive for them. I think it gave them great momentum. I think there was a shift, and I think since then that pressure obviously has been alleviated, and they've enjoyed themselves a lot more. I saw it, and I'd agree fully with him. Fitzmaurice said it lately that this year, what would you say is different this year? Obviously, take the rules out of it. There's a lot more players playing well for Kerry this year than there was last year. They're easier picked out. And I'm not just going in the last game. I'm going over the last 6, 7, 8 games. Like Diarmuid O'Connor was going well until he was injured.
Joe
Cliffords are going well. Joe O'Connor is flying. You have Brian Begley, Gavin White are flying. Their full back line is going well. So there's a lot more. You couldn't say that last year, but because it was Kerry, you'd say, right, they'll crank it up in championship. And when you think of it, lads, Kerry weren't too far off at the end of the day either. But I do think that there's a huge challenge still there for them, and a challenge that they will relish down the road. but they obviously have to navigate through, and people will say that they're after getting a weak draw. I don't think they look at it like that, and that was always the thrown at Kerry anyway. And you can argue for and argue against. The biggest challenge for Kerry teams down the years was the quarter final after coming out of Munster, because they didn't know where they were at. And the same argument could be made for the group that they're in now, even though they won't agree with it. And proper order, they will take Roscommon and Cork at face value, because they got such a fright off Cork below on their day. They can't but prepare properly for it. But if it's a case that Kerry come through this group fairly handily, then you're still waiting for a proper road test. But I have a feeling they will get a road tested in this, even though Roscommon haven't been going too great. I still think Cork were.
Oh, the fear of going to Páirc Uí Chaoimh.
I know, but like, you look at the last game, and speaking to fellas close to the Cork camp, they were disgusted, which is good. That's a good, they were disgusted.
But you know what happens usually in those situations, Tomás, is like, so you're in the Kerry dressing room. These fellas thought they were unlucky not to beat us the last time. And usually what happens on the back of that is a lesson.
Yeah. That psychology will always be there. The Cork fellas have to work their psychology as well. These fellas don't respect us at all.
Yeah. But I mean, the questions are still going to be there, though, because if, let's take it on the basis that they win this group with Roscommon, Cork and Meath. You're right. They still top the group. We're still waiting again. And the same thing sits there for them. I don't think anybody expects that Kerry don't top this group. And you're still well into the summer before you have an idea, versus, let's just say, the Ulster champions and the road that they will have travelled by then. And I think that maybe that's why people are talking Donegal and Armagh up in a way that they're not quite talking about Kerry yet.
Yeah, I the same thing. Sure, we're just after going through the same thing is being said to us at 20 level. We came through a fairly handy Munster Championship, and the next thing, the first team from the north that we met, we were in bother. And everybody's saying, the intensity isn't there for you. And the same thing will be levelled at Kerry. If they come out of the group with Cork, with Roscommon, with Meath, and they have no huge challenge, and they just coast through, the same thing will be thrown at them. And it's actually not, I think Kerry would much rather a right few tough battles.
Yeah.
But it's just like, I don't know, certain teams outside the top 3 or 4 teams will be seen by everybody else to be just handled quickly, without any issue, without any fuss. And that can be difficult and challenging for Kerry, because they're going to be seen to be able to beat 3 teams handily. So they have to be, it's a long 6 weeks then when you're trying to get fellas to say, right, everybody's going to be telling you, and everybody's going to be saying, ye will hammer these, you'll steamroll these, and it's made for the opposition to throw a clutter in the works. And look, they should be, you'd say on paper, and what we've seen already this year through everything, that they should be dealing with that. But if I was a player, I'd hate to be facing the next 6 weeks, because the whole county, and if you have a speed wobble or whatever, it's just the nature of it. They'll be questioning everything if you don't beat them. But I think Kerry were very pleased with the fact that they got a right road test against Cork. They came out, they looked very sharp against the poor enough Clare team in Killarney. But Clare still hurt them in the second half, so there's plenty to work on for Jack. I think he'll be happy out where Kerry are at the minute, and the fact that so many players are playing well, but that they've a carrot of trying to outdo what happened last year again this year. So I think they're in a good place, Jacqui. I think they'll know it's not good enough to win in All-Ireland, but right now they'll take what they have.
Yeah, and you're right. They've got 6 weeks before that. They don't even have to worry about it right now. They can just see what happens elsewhere.
It is still a challenge, though, Jacqui. I mean, the key, I suppose, like the main caveat to these group stages, which I think it's a little bit trite, to be honest, the fact that, like, top the group and you get a week off. And look, it is a good prize, but is it like this stellar prize that was being made out initially? I'm not so sure. But having said that, the flip side of it is, like, the 8 of the teams are going to play 5 matches in 6 weeks. And that's quite a challenge on your panel. Injuries, suspensions, your selection issues. Like there's quite a job of work from a management perspective on that front.
Yeah. And in fairness, the top seeds did end up still going quite well in the All-Ireland series last year. So you do have to consider the prize as you talk about. Some of the other groups maybe do have those road tests that you're talking about, Tomás, because even when you look at Mayo this weekend against Cavan, it's almost a must-win game from day one because they've got Donegal and Tyrone in the group, which you would expect are going to be their tougher games. So for Kevin McStay, you're starting out an All-Ireland series where you absolutely have to win. And I think maybe they're in a different position than a lot of those other, if you want to call them top teams. This, to me, is a sort of a marquee game for a Mayo in terms of making sure of their position going forward and what the All-Ireland series might look like for them.
Yeah, there's two really hard groups. And that's obviously one of them. Jesus, it's like everybody, at least, and without disrespecting teams, you could always possibly look at one team and say, right, depending if you're home and away, that should be a given there. But in this group, for I think Mayo are probably lucky in a way that it is Cavan first, and that it doesn't change the fact that they will be expected to beat Cavan, but that's not a given. I know Cavan were poor, very poor in their last performance, and they'll be looking at that. But they've had a good break now, and they've only had one championship match this year. They were, I thought, given what we'd seen in the league from Cavan, that they would be a way, way better. So you can imagine that they've got a good bit of work done. And like you look at Mayo, and I think there's something strange. Like what happened against Leitrim wasn't it. All it does is rise the pressure. And I know you look at the Galway game, and in fairness, I didn't see that performance coming. Mayo had taken their chances, should have probably have asked more questions of Galway in the final few minutes there, and probably could have easily have won that game. So I think it's probably the right game for Mayo now. If they can get over Cavan, I'm not saying Cavan will be a pushover, I think Cavan will be a right tough test. Sometimes there's teams you expect them to win games and they won't. And then there's teams that you don't know if there's a performance in them. Mayo should guarantee, if they win at the weekend, that they'll come out of the group and get to a preliminary quarter-final at worst.
Could you see them beating Donegal or Tyrone, though?
Not on what we've seen, no, you can't. But that doesn't mean that it won't happen, Jacqui. I will, if you told me Mayo beat Tyrone, it wouldn't surprise me, because Mayo will always, and you see a few teams in it, I don't know what it is, Mayo will always have enough chances to bury two teams. They will. And it's just, that's intensity that they play with that always show up, but it's just the final third of the field just so continuously seems to be a struggle for them, yet they're still creating it. And people will always, and does it apply now, giving it that it was years ago, people would always say, you've Mayo. What we used to prepare for Mayo was, what if all the chances that they actually did create were scored? Then you'd lose most times you play Mayo.
Then they'd have won some All-Irelands along the way. And I'm not being facetious about that, genuinely. Like,
yeah, but it must have a psychologically, they're probably one of the most talked about teams in the country. And then you have a support that are brilliant. They're amazing. They fill out every place they go. Even with all the hurt, they just have an insatiable appetite for it. But I guarantee you that adds its pressures to the team as well. It's just like every single year, it's a pressure cooker above there. And but it's not. I'd say it's enjoyable in another way for everybody else to be watching, because
it's a big weekend.
You don't know what you're going to get.
It's a big weekend for them, because they've the under-20 semi-final on Friday night in Longford against Louth, who we mentioned earlier, and then their senior team are out at the weekend. Like, there's a couple of things with them for me, Jacqui, in relation to the what Tomás mentioned about their shooting, and they're just that lack of cutting edge. Like, they've two 2-pointers scored across 3 championship matches, and both of them came the last day against Galway, when they were playing with the wind in the second half through Ryan O'Donoghue and Matty Ruane. But also there was a really odd situation in that game where they had a 2-point free option very late on, and Ryan O'Donoghue elected to kick right to left with a right foot and missed the kick. And about 2 minutes later, they won a 45, and Reid put the ball down from slightly more centrist position and nailed it. And I just, for the life of me, couldn't understand why they wouldn't have brought Reap up to kick that dead ball 2-pointer. And because he kicked a more or less similar one, but it was only a 1 point score a couple of minutes later. So like you just wonder sometimes, do they, like, what decision making on field? I know it was a very frenetic Connacht final, but the pressure is going to be on. I mean, they have, like, to be in a group, like there's 7 teams across the 2 groups, 1 and 4, and Cavan. So you'd have to feel for Cavan to a certain extent. They're so unlucky to have found themselves in that mix. But if Mayo don't get 2 points at the weekend, they'll be under savage pressure then, because, you know, like, I mean, if they lose to Cavan, Cavan will have them on the head-to-head, and then they'll have to get a victory against Tyrone or Donegal, and that won't be easy.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to have to finish up, Tomás, but I feel like the All-Ireland series already, or the All-Ireland competition, has actually already produced in terms of what maybe our expectation levels were. When you look at Louth last weekend, a really good Connacht final, which, as you say, Mayo could have won, a really good Munster championship with Kerry being pushed all the way, and albeit the final didn't go to plan, and a brilliant Ulster final last weekend. The All-Ireland series actually has quite a lot to live up to this weekend, starting off from what has been a brilliant provincial campaign.
It does, I think, Jacqui, and there isn't any one rule that you can pinpoint, but I think you ask anybody you meet, there's a general agreement that the game is better to watch.
The game is
better to watch. Simple as. And you can be talking about, and there is, of course, have we still issues with it? We do. There's a few issues you could be giving out about all the time, but you're seeing a lot more exciting games. The weekend we had last weekend, in terms of what happened in Leinster, what happened in Ulster the Saturday night, was phenomenal, and there was plenty of, there's still defensive football there, but it's extremely interesting to watch. And I think if you rewind, we all said at the start, give it a year. There was an amount of people complaining at the start of the year. Do you remember a couple of months ago, it seems like a long time ago, but the managers were going nuts every single weekend with the rules and all that. There's nobody talking about rules anymore. There's nobody talking about, and don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean there aren't issues with the rules, but they're getting on with it. The games are there, or the rules are there on paper. Managers are getting on with it. Teams are getting on with it, and they're slowly but surely getting better. Kerry, we're not, and we spoke about Mayo, we're not focusing in on 2-pointers. Give it time, and all teams will try to maximize the potential that is in every rule. But I when you have actually fellas saying for once, you know, they're talking about the hurling and all that, and it's brilliant. The hurling will always be just a different match. I wouldn't even compare hurling and football anyway, because, and not in any way, I'm a football man, I'll always be a football man, but hurling is just different. It's a different sport completely to Gaelic.
I'd love to have seen you with a hurley, Tomás.
I had a hurley. I used to drive cattle with it. Shawnee Larry's hurley. Shawnee Larry used to holiday in our house, and we used to hide the hurleys on him before they leave. Tomás O'Leary and Kieran. And,
brilliant.
You're driving cattle with the hurleys after.
Come here, Tomás. Can I ask you one question, right? And just before we go, because it's just one small, it's not a rules thing, as in it's not a criticism of the rules per se. Now, it's just a small little particular bugbear of mine. The last 3 or 4 minutes, and we saw it with Louth, we've seen it a couple of times, where teams are getting the ball and they're looking to try and run the clock down. Now, this is only a personal view, and this isn't probably within the rules, but I would love, in those situations, when a team is engaged in cynical and negative play, to try and obviously win the game within the rules, and more power to them. But I would love for referees, a very difficult thing to do, I know, to employ a little bit more leniency around the tackle when teams are trying to get the ball back in those situations. What do you think?
Never going to happen.
Well, you see, you define. I'll ask you a question back. You define the leniency.
Rory wants a free for all.
Well, like, I'll give you an example, right?
Head off him.
Well, not necessarily, but like, I'll give you an example. Last week, I think it was Matthew Costello was chasing down, I can't remember, my apologies now, who the Louth defender was. And yeah, he was kind of putting 2 hands around. And in fairness to McNally, who had an outstanding game, really, all through, but he blew for a free out when you knew this guy was in trouble, because one of the other great rules, by the way, is he couldn't pass the ball back to the goalkeeper. He didn't have that out ball. Yet the ref gave him the handy free, and then it was just a reset for Louth, and they were able to continue that necklace and that chain of hand passing. Whereas I was kind of saying, just go on, let it flow, let it play here, and let's see what happens, because this is going to be mega if he turns the ball over. I think though, and it's only a personal view. So I'm obviously talking complete nonsense. What I'd love to see is them to say, for the referees to say, look, if they're going to engage in this, I'm going to allow the team that's trying to get the ball back a small bit more leniency around the tackle, because it would just make for a better spectacle, I suppose. That's really selfish on my end. They'll
never actually say that they're going to do that. But I think a lot of refs down the years, if you see a team go 10 points up, 12 points up, they tend to give softer frees to the team that are lagging.
The scoreboard ref.
But all it needs, Rory, I think, when you have teams, and it's happened a couple of times, and you heard Ger Brennan the last day that they had practiced that. They actually had practiced that in training, that if they were ahead going in, how they would finish out the game the last 3 or 4 minutes in possession. But what would be great to see would be a team, that chased them down, that if you're minding the ball a little bit too much, and if you get scalded for minding that ball, teams will then see, well, look what happened between X and Y when they played. The boys were trying to mind the ball.
Yeah, you need someone to really get caught, don't you? Yeah.
Won the game as a result. So it's not necessarily, we need to be shown a template of how to counteract that, but I don't think that template will be given by the refs. I think it'll have to be a team that will show us how to go after it.
Wait until you're the county board chairman, Rory. You can go in there with all your new
We'll get the motion
proposals.
ready for Congress.
Right, lads, we'll leave it there. Tomás, great to have you back. Thanks a million for being with us.
He hits it! It's over the bar! Oh, holy Moses!
Well, Neil is with myself and Rory now to chat hurling, and certainly feels like summer championship is in the air, Neil. The weather is great. The matches are coming thick and fast, and this is exactly what hurling fans want this weekend.
Oh, it's unbelievable. We're getting close to the real business end where teams are leaving. Teams are in their last chance, and there's nothing beats it like knockout championship hurling, especially when there's a wee bit of sun there to, let us all get into the mood. I remember being at the first round of the Munster Championship last year, which was in Ennis between Clare and Limerick, and it was like a carnival. I promise you, it was like something like Mardi Gras. It was just incredible. Now I'm going on Sunday to Limerick and Cork, and I cannot wait. I'm like a child before Christmas for it, because it's the big ticket one, all right, this weekend. And the Munster Hurling Championship has already given us a huge amount. It's going to give us more. I know the Leinster Championship might be next weekend before it really gets down to the nitty-gritty, but just we're lucky. We're lucky that we have these two championships. They have been producing over the last 3 or 4 years, and this year's been no different.
Yeah, big time. Well, as you say, the Munster Championship feels like it's go time on Sunday, because you've got Tipperary, Waterford at 2:00, followed by the big one, Limerick and Cork at 4. So let's start with that one then, because as you say, there's just a real sense of, I don't know, an occasion. The fact that it's sold out at the Gaelic grounds, the fact that it's these two teams. I was listening to an interview with Brian Hayes during the week, and he was saying Limerick are still the best team in the country. We know that. And it was interesting to hear a Cork hurler saying that so openly, that that's still the way that they feel. And I think for them, they're going to want to say, look, we want to lay down a marker against these. We might have beaten them twice last year, but if they still rate them as the best team in the country, then Sunday is a big deal to them.
Jacqui, make no mistake about it. Brian Hayes thinks Cork are the best hurling team in the country. There's no second guessing that. Brian's playing the game there. I'll tell you what I can't wait to see is Brian up against Dan Morrissey, because I think that's who he'll have for company. And Dan, every time we question Dan in any way, shape or form, he comes up with the answers. Will he ever have played against somebody in the form of Brian Hayes with the physical attributes to match? He's going to get a real test, that's for sure. But look, these are the two teams that both believe they are the best teams in the country. And like, I would say Cork have said, lads, wouldn't it be lovely to go into Limerick now and turn them over? That would be a real sign that we're number one. You can imagine that bus arriving into the middle of Limerick. down to the Gaelic grounds, you know, the song Killa by Kingfisher absolutely vibrating the bus as the lads get off. Just Cork ready for war. Like the matchups all around the field, like I cannot wait to see Tim O'Mahony go up against Will O'Donoghue. I think that'll be war, to be totally honest. Then, you know, we've Cian Lynch against Robert Downey, even Owen Downey against the Bull O'Brien. It is mouthwatering in every way you look at it. These two teams can still end up in the final against each other. It may well be the dress rehearsal, but there's no room for that. So we're going to get the full-blooded version of this. It's just might be part one.
Yeah.
But it's something else to look forward to.
Yeah. And that's funny. That's the question, Rory, I was going to ask you, because they don't know what the outcome is. It might be only part one, but they kind of have to both go for it anyway, because I don't think anybody can take a risk when it comes to this Munster Championship. So they'll have to be full-blooded on Sunday, regardless of what they think might happen further down the track.
Absolutely 100%. There's no shadow boxing here. There's a notion out there that they both have a safety net by having a game again the following week.
I don't think so.
Not a hope in absolute hell is that going to happen. This will be full on. Like, it's so exciting now at this time of the year. We know the weather we're having. I mentioned to you beforehand, we're going to go down and have a few pucks ourselves with the small fella down on the ball wall as soon as we finish up here. And I don't know who's more excited for the few pucks, me or the small guy. So it's hurling season. It's now at its peak. The weather, the atmosphere, 40,000 people in the Gaelic grounds. It'll be packed. It'll be a huge Cork crowd there as well. Two teams that have played each other 3 championship matches over the last 2 years, 4 points separating them across the 3 games. It's wafer thin. Limerick at home. Limerick, the team with all the titles. Limerick, the team with all the baubles. Limerick, the team that I think are still, even though they might be slightly insulted by the notion that Cork are favourites, they're also a team that are still smarting, I'm sure, over the 2 defeats from last year. I would expect Limerick to start this in a blaze. But I think Cork will understand the challenge and they'll have huge respect for it. Of course they will. But it'll be a question then of whether or not they can rise to meet that challenge. I think one key matchup that Neil mentioned there, and it is a key one for me, is Shane O'Brien versus Owen Downey. And that might be a very, very interesting pairing because Shane is a big unit. Owen is still very much learning his trade. Now, Shane is quite young as well, but his physical development is obviously a little bit more advanced. But I think we kind of know what the Limerick team is going to be, considering the way they played the last day below in Walsh Park. Might be a small selection issue around Cork, given the fact that Shane Barrett is fit again. There's a few murmurings around the fitness of Seamus Harnedy. If that were to transpire as being true, then you would imagine it's fairly straightforward. But I think, look, an awful lot of this is going to come down to, there will be tactics at play. We know what Kinnerk is like. We know how smart he is, but we also know how smart Pat Ryan is. Cork really got after them last year in terms of turning them on their heels with Route 1 and getting the ball in behind that half back line. I think they probably will have to do something similar again. Because if you're looking at that half back line, particularly from the last day with Burns, Kyle Hayes now at 6, and Barry Nash out onto the wing, that's quite a wall to try and surmount. So that is going to be key to it.
To me, that's the biggest question for Cork on Limerick. Do Limerick have the legs to deal with the Cork backs? And on the flip side, to Rory's point, Neil, the biggest question I would ask of the Cork team with Limerick coming at them is, can that full back line handle Limerick? Because they have been susceptible to giving up some easy goals as well. So give me those 2 questions and where you kind of get a sense of where those two defences are at.
So it's funny that Rory said, you know, that Shane O'Brien is a big unit himself. He absolutely is. The problem for Owen Downey is Shane can make as many mistakes as he likes during the game.
Yeah,
Owen makes one and it's a goal.
Yeah.
And he is learning his trade. You know, any fullback, no fullback really hits their stride until their 3rd or 4th season, because there is an art to playing fullback. You know, you have to be as good at playing the ball as you are the man, and vice versa. it's a difficult one to get just right. Owen is guilty at the minute, sometimes of trying to win the ball outright when he might be as well playing the man, let it run through to the goalkeeper and let him lash it, 100 yards up the field. So look, he is learning, but he has all the tools, and that's an intriguing one. I actually think it's the cornerbacks and the corner forwards who stays inside. Cork play with three inside an awful lot of the time. Patrick Horgan gets the license a little bit at times just to come out the field and play on the loop. I think he'll have O'Donoghue for company, and that's a really intriguing one. But Patrick Horgan's been in brilliant form as well, moving really well. And I actually think, or sorry, I should have said he'll have Sean Finn for company. Switching up there, but I think he'll try and take him out the field. I think Hoggy will try and take Sean Finn out the field because Sean Finn is, people don't realise that Sean might only be 5'10", but he's incredibly strong. He's incredibly strong. So he loves to work in around the square and use that physical presence because his tackling's incredible as well. But I think Patrick Horgan will play a little bit further away from goal on a good few occasions. I know he does come out at times anyway, but I think he'll come out and he's moving so well. He is genuinely moving like a 21-year-old. I think he'll try and bring Sean Finn out because, Sean's his fair share of injury troubles, even recently during this year's league and stuff. But he improved the last day too. I think whoever wins that battle, that could have a massive say on it. Then at the other side of the field, it's funny, before we had the Bull O'Brien on the edge of the square for Limerick, Aaron Gallan was playing that role, kind of sitting very deep, really content to contest high ball with any of the fullbacks in the land. So if you're using your most aerially dominant player on somebody else, Aaron Gallan is an absolute handful in there. Now, I think O'Donoghue will go with Aaron Gallan, that's what I meant to say earlier, and he's physically strong, but Gallan is incredible in the air. So it's just what John decides to do tactically on the day, and obviously Connacht will have a big say in that too. But I think we could see actually two men inside for Limerick. I think the Bull might even play slightly further away from the net with Gallan holding that deep role that we've seen the Bull O'Brien in more recently, because I think he won't end up having Owen Downey for company on the edge of the square if that is the case. And Gallan without a big, strong number 3 up against him is so dangerous.
Yeah, so many questions, so many answers. And I hope it's only part one, Rory, because I actually think right now on current evidence, I know the Leinster Championship, Neil is right, it hasn't really fired, but the Munster Championship has in a lot of ways. And we've got a lot of contenders in there who we may well see in an All-Ireland final. And I think these are definitely two of the top 3 or 4 teams in the country right now.
Yeah, and they have the credentials. Look, you're talking about it, Limerick, who were, Cork stopped them from going for 5 in a row last year. That's another thing I'm sure that'll be spoken about in the Limerick dressing room. And then they're going for 7 Munster Championships in a row, never been done. So this is an extraordinary period of success for Limerick hurling, and all of those things I would imagine are going to form part of the narrative for Kylie and Connacht, and just in terms of getting their Limerick players in the right mindset for Sunday and knowing that the challenge is coming. But Cork know that the challenge is coming too, and I think that's why both teams will rise to this. I just hope the sort of silliness that we've seen pre-match where, look, young Darren McCarthy was the one to suffer. I hope there'll be plenty of scalping and flaking once the ball is thrown in. I just hope that we don't see a situation where one team is put down to 14, because, look, we know what ended up happening there the last day. Liam Gordon reffing, I don't think there's any issues on that front. He generally likes to let the game flow. Couple of issues, I suppose, from a Cork perspective. Ethan Toomey didn't have his best day the last day. He was taken off, and you would imagine he might have come under pressure if they were trying to accommodate Barrett, and then they would have had the option maybe of shifting Darragh Fitzgibbon back to midfield. But look, I think it's a really good problem for Pat to have. I think he has no issues in terms of the depth he has up front. His bigger challenge really is trying to shut things down at the back. But I think Cork are quite happy to get into shootouts, and so are Limerick, and that's what makes it. I mean, if you look at last year's, the scorelines was a 326 to 328 in that famous night in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. 326 to 328. Let that sink in. There's every chance we get something similar again. I don't necessarily see one team flopping. I don't see a team blowing the other team away. I just don't see that happening somehow.
Yeah,
And
I think you're
wouldn't-
right.
And I wouldn't be surprised, Jacqui. I would not be surprised with a share of the spoils.
Yeah.
Call. I don't know. Games that are that high scoring, it's so hard to, to get a draw in them.
Yeah.
I think you tapping Waterford has massive potential for a draw whenever you weigh all their pros and cons up. But I think you've made a brilliant point there, Rory, on Liam Gordon. We've heard Michael Dignan during the match saying he's been able to hear what Liam has been saying to the players. I know even from personal experience, you can ask Liam a question and he'll answer it. You have to approach him in the right way, as we should with all the referees, but he will answer it and he keeps the game flowing because he answers things very, very concisely, quickly, and players just have to get on with it because they've been given a reasonable answer. That actually helps the temperament of the player because they're not being told to get out, get away, get out of my face type thing. The players have got a response and they're like, okay, even if you don't agree, it leads to you saying, well, he responded, he gave me his side of things, and now we're going again. So I think that will happen. And therein will facilitate the shootout. It's not going to be 16 points to 18 points. That is for sure.
Certainly won't.
I think you're right.
Even the way Waterford played against Limerick, there was only 2 kind of half goal chances in the whole game for Limerick, which is unusual for them. But Tadhg de Burke obviously drops back. They're going to go man for man all over the field. Yes, I think Limerick more in particularly will try and leave 2 up top in kind of a single line fashion, but it will be man for man. There won't be sweepers. Definitely Kyle will sit in that number 6 position. He will not be dragged out onto the wing this year and left by himself and having no impact in the game. He's going to be very much involved. I think he'll be encouraged to carry ball as well out of the defence to make Cork go in the wrong direction, because obviously they are the best attacking team in the country. So I think there'll be a little bit of that too. Tactically, Limerick will carry some ball that we probably haven't seen them do just as much recently.
Fun times ahead on Sunday. No doubt about it. That is the marquee game of the weekend. The game before that between Tip and Waterford, I think you're right. Big chance of this being a draw. They've played 5 times in the round robin and Waterford have won 2. Tip have won 1 and those 2 draws. So if you are Waterford, you're thinking, you know what? We've actually had a fair handle on Tip over the years. Tip might be coming with a lot and, big momentum behind them. But I think Waterford will be happy enough saying, you know what? Come on in. We're ready.
Yeah, Tip are favourites, and rightly so, after their performance against Clare. That take nothing away from that performance. But if you think about Waterford's lead in to the Limerick game, they had just beaten Clare. They were, ecstatic with that result. It's very hard to get up to those levels, come back down midweek and get right back up to them the next week. Or actually it was less than, I think it was a 6-day turnaround.
6 days.
So they will be sitting nice and fresh, seeing this as a huge opportunity to progress out of the group. And the teams are so evenly matched. Even we've given Tip great credit for getting the spine of their defence right with Conley and Ronan Maher. Look at Waterford in terms of having Prunty on the edges square again and Tadhg de Burke out back at 6, and that's really settled them. Even at 11, you've Jake Morris for Tip causing teams all sorts of problems. We always knew he had the skill. We always knew he had the athleticism and pace. Now he's brought the steel to it as well. He's going and getting ball, winning primary possession for them, taking teams on. Jamie Barron presents a very similar option in the half forward line for Waterford. He gives Ronan Maher something totally different to deal with as well. Obviously, Ronan just went everywhere with Peter Duggan last week. Jamie Barnes a totally different challenge, and probably one that will give Ronan more trouble, to be totally honest. It's great, then we've got the inside man of John McGrath, who himself and his brother Noel are just rolling back the years, enjoying a real Indian summer. And then we have up front in Desi Hutchinson, and probably Stephen Bennett will move a little bit closer to goal at times and then go back out again, giving a very similar threat. John McGrath is such a wristy hurler. He has so much hurling IQ. Stephen Bennett, really similar in that regard. If Dara McCarthy comes back in, you've got a brilliant hurler with loads of pace. A la Desi Hutchinson, it's the teams are so similar that I wouldn't be one bit surprised if we have a draw at the end of this, which actually probably won't do the job for Waterford.
Yeah.
They need to win.
The one concern I would have for Tip, Rory, is the emotional and physical high of last weekend.
Huge.
And the toll that might take, given that Waterford have had a break and they have been waiting.
That it's absolutely huge. I mean, we saw it even with Waterford, with the turnaround. They were very flat. They were very
I know it
flat.
was 6 days. It's tight.
6
but like
days
they were
is tight.
flat.
So they were flat, and they've had 2 weeks now, and I think 2 weeks is nearly the ideal amount of time. It's a big job of work for Liam Cahill to try and get players down and build them back up again in the space of a 1 week turnaround. Now they've 8 days, whatever that's worth. I'm sure the recovery was done on Sunday, and they were back training on Tuesday night. It wouldn't be a huge amount, I would imagine, in terms of any sort of physical stuff at this time of the year. That's all done. So it's just, I suppose, whether or not like you can get that level of performance again. And I suppose it's just such a brilliant opportunity for both teams. I don't necessarily see Thurles being too much of a mystery for Waterford. I think they'll quite enjoy the fact that they're going up there. We all know how that pitch plays. It's just it's the hurling field in many ways. So, and then we don't really know what kind of a crowd will turn up. The Waterford crowd certainly seem to have gotten in behind them now once again.
I think it'll be a big crowd, yeah.
Yeah, and there is a sense that the Waterford crowd are starting to kind of come in behind them and support them. I think the Tipperary crowd will respond to what they saw last Saturday night in Ennis. So I think the crowd should be largely 50-50. We should be expecting 30 plus. And look, I suppose there is an element of championship knockout, especially for Tip. This is the first time to get out of Munster and the first opportunity to get out of Munster. Get 5 points on the board come Sunday to 3:30, 4:15, and they have their job done, and it's up to the rest. Because like the reality is, from a Tipperary perspective, if they don't get out and if they don't win, their year is over on Sunday. They're not playing in the final round. So there's a huge amount on the line for them. I know Waterford will have the stickiness of having to come to Páirc Uí Chaoimh the following week should they lose. They probably don't want to have to rely on that fixture if that's how things pan out. So like I think both games are so finely poised and finely balanced. It's almost impossible to call, and I think it'll all probably come down to special moments, special players, and I think 2 massively special occasions.
Yeah. They're not the only ones on Sunday, because the biggest fixture in Leinster is also on Sunday afternoon. Kilkenny
3
Dublin
o'clock. I
at
mean,
3 o'clock.
29 intercounty fixtures this weekend, Jacqui. It's borderline bonkers. Like
It is. And to be honest, when you have them all on at the same time, I think it's very hard, Neil, for hurling fans to be double screening games that I know you might say that Munster feels like it's a bigger crunch weekend this weekend, but like there's so much still riding on Dublin Kilkenny as well. A lot of people are going to have both of these on in front of them and want to be seeing both of those games.
Jacqui, why did we have a weekend with only one game?
Yeah.
You know, that has got to be answered. Somebody has got to answer that, because I haven't heard the retort yet. And it just seems like utter madness when we only, like, everybody knew there was only going to be 2 days in every weekend of the year. So, you know, let's use them both in each weekend. It's very, very strange that that's the way the fixtures ended up being rolled out, because, like, why couldn't we have used a Saturday evening and had 2 games on a Sunday, as we have done for most of the weekends? And we've given hurling the biggest platform it could possibly have, because we need to. Like, hurling is the sport that we need to develop. You know, yes, we had to make football more exciting again, and you know the FRC have done that, brilliant, and everybody's loving it. But we need to give hurling a bigger platform. We need to take every opportunity available to us to grow the sport. So whenever we have the best players in the country playing in one of the biggest games in the country, why can everybody not have that chance to watch that game, you know, without having to miss something else? It's actually very annoying, to be totally honest. Pretty frustrating, because Dublin Kilkenny is a massive game. I know I'd hyped Dublin up a little bit before the Leinster final last year. I'm a fan of this Dublin team. They are physically very imposing.
Yeah.
They have incredible athletes, but they're starting to get that structure right. I do feel that they're still missing a kind of natural fullback since Owen O'Donnell has left. Paddy Smith is no bad replacement, but he is a more natural cornerback. Paddy's he's a very, very physically strong guy. But again, we spoke about it earlier with Owen. You do have to learn how to play fullback. So, and Paddy's doing that at the minute too. But they're incredibly athletic, all over the field. I know they're missing Danny Sutcliffe. He was in a knee brace last weekend. I don't know if he's, what stage of the season he's going to make it back for, because he's a bit of a, if you like him with John Conlon as the Clare, Danny Sutcliffe is the Dublin, kind of that spiritual leader of the team, been through the mill for them over the last decade and a half, and obviously awarded with an All-Star for his troubles. But it'd be great to see him back, and hopefully we will see him back. But like, Kilkenny are coming with a two-man full forward line of Mossy Keown and Owen Cody. Your full back line would want to be right on him. To keep those two at bay, because they are goal hungry and they're moving incredibly well. Two very similar players, actually, two incredibly direct, powerful inside forwards. And Dublin don't really play very defensively anymore. Chris Crummy does sit back at times, but you notice whenever Dublin pick up the ball deep, he will give a short pass and he will be on the receiving end of it. He's clipping over a couple of points from play every week. Himself and Mark Fitzgerald, probably, from Waterford, two of the best halfbacks I've seen this year, actually. They might not be playing on one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the country, but they're two exceptional players. I've really enjoyed watching them. So, look, the game between Kilkenny and Dublin and Parnell Park last year was an absolute thriller.
Unbelievable game.
I think we'll get the same. I think we'll get the same.
Yeah, because the reason I ask is the only reason I have any query about it is for Dublin. The way I see it is they've got 2 opportunities. They beat Kilkenny or Galway, and they've potentially find themselves in a Leinster final. And I would have thought that they might sense that Galway is a bigger opportunity to get a victory. So I wonder if they go very hard this weekend and they don't get it, what the toll of that is for the following weekend.
I don't think they're that fragile anymore, Jacqui, to be honest. I think Dublin are very comfortable in their own skin. I think they'll know that Kilkenny are operating a few percent above them at the minute. Because it's not like they have blown every team yet too strong front them, but they struggled against Offaly, they struggled against Wexford. They're not moving in 6th gear just yet. But I don't think they're thinking, God, should we hedge our bets here and let's wait the next weekend and throw everything at that? Because a lot of people see next weekend's fixture against Galway in Parnell Park as a semi-final of the Leinster Championship, which it most likely will end up being, unless Dublin beat Kilkenny this weekend. But
True.
I think they'll go gung-ho at it. They'll fire the kitchen sink at Kilkenny. I do still expect Kilkenny to come through it, but I think it'll be really tight. I think Dublin will learn loads, and I do expect Dublin to be in the Leinster final this year again, and I don't think it'll be a repeat of what we've seen last year.
Yeah. And look, to be honest, Rory, it can't be, because if Dublin are to take the next step, they can't have another day like what they had in a Leinster final. And I think what Neil has said is right. The round robin game in Parnell Park last year is probably a much closer reflection of what this Dublin team are and have been than what the Leinster final was. But I think if they are to have taken another step, then this weekend is probably the biggest step for them to overcome of all.
Yeah, and I don't really know, Jacqui, what happened in that Leinster final. It just seemed to be like it just seemed to be a total malfunction right across the team. From basically the first whistle to last, they sat off Kilkenny, they gave up puck outs, they weren't really. Look, they were very much in a rebuild mode. It was Mihal's second year with them, and he's trying to obviously put a new identity on the team. We've seen that now developed even further this year with Neil O'Callaghan. I think Na Fianna, and there's a strong Na Fianna presence within the team. I think them winning the All-Ireland club earlier in the year, I think that's obviously boosted their confidence. I think the jury is 100% out on Galway. You just don't really know what you have with Galway just yet. But I don't think they can, no different to Cork or Limerick, hang their hat on the potential of taking Galway down the last day out in Parnell Park, as much and all as they'll be formidable inside the Nell. Like, what a remarkable statement and opportunity for the Dublin hurlers to make than to go down to Nolan Park on Sunday and turn Kilkenny over. Can we trust that they have the ability to do that? I think, look, all we can do is wait and see. I think physically they'll match up quite well. It's just whether or not they will have enough of a goal threat up front. Does Donald Burke start, for instance? He came on the last day, didn't make a huge impact. So will TJ will start the game? I know he played the last day again. So, like, I think it's poised quite well. And yeah, you would have to say, on all known form, Kilkenny are at home. Don't obviously cough up too many defeats. And I'd have a small inkling for them this time round again.
Yeah, I hear you.
It's funny, Rory, you would mention Donald Burke, a player that I really have enjoyed watching.
He just got injured and kind of lost his place now.
Even in the club campaign, obviously they were beaten in the Leinster final the previous year by O'Loughlin Gales, and this year when they went and won it, he was injured at a stage, so Colin Curry started hitting the frees and was going really well on them, so they just never switched Donald Burke back onto them. And then this year with Dublin, Sean Curry's hitting the frees, and you know, if you're wanting to go and learn how to hit frees, I think you would go to Nafena.
Yeah,
they're spoiled for choice there.
They sure are.
They're marching nicely. They're marching very nicely.
Okay, come here. In the last couple of minutes to finish up on those other two games on Saturday, obviously, Neil, you're involved. You've got Galway in Pearse Stadium at 2:30 and then Wexford Offaly in Wexford Park at 5. For Antrim hurling, you know, listen, I know you've probably heard, read, seen everything that has been said about it, but you get to the point where I'm sure you're just like, okay, one win. We just need to get the ship back up on the road and we need to get moving. But going to Salt Hill this weekend certainly doesn't get any easier for the team.
It doesn't, and you know, even if you manage to, you know, get a result, then it doesn't actually secure any sort of sense of Leinster Championship status going forward. So it's just about a performance, and look, Antrim are down quite a few bodies this weekend, so it is going to come down to the final day, and that's how Offaly and Antrim will be viewing things. Galway will probably try out a lot of people, a lot of players from their panel on Saturday evening, as will probably Wexford against Offaly. I know there's a little bit of rivalry there, you know, that a little bit of bragging rights on the line, but look, it's really all down to next weekend in Leinster. You know, the big ticket one is obviously Dublin Kilkenny this weekend, and outside of that, it's the Munster Championship. Plus, one other big game in Leinster this weekend is Carlow and Laois. And Joe McDonough,
huge.
like, Carlow will be smarting after Kildare beating them, and you know, talking to a couple of people who were at the game, Kildare were full value. I think they won by 6 in the end, full value for their victory, and they've really thrown their hat in the ring. I know whenever I looked at Joe McDonough at the start of the year, I was thinking, you know, Carlow and Laois in the final there, they're the two strongest teams. Kildare might just have upset the apple cart, and they've down this weekend. So Kildare will be confident, very confident this weekend. Down have shipped a lot of scores over the last two fixtures. And yeah, it's good to see, which actually makes this fixture between Carlow and Laois more important, because Carlow might just have to win that one to actually get to the final.
Yeah, 2 of just the 29 matches that we'll have to keep our eyes on over the weekend. Way too many games, even for us to cover. So, lads, I'm afraid we will have to leave.
Good luck on Sunday night. Good luck on Sunday night,
But you
Jacqui.
know what? Thankfully, there's a Saturday game these days, because it does mean now, and I'm sure people listening are saying, well, why can't you show them all on the Sunday or whatever? Because the program isn't 5 hours long. But thankfully, we've got a Saturday night highlights program, which will do all the Saturday games, and we just get to focus on the Sunday games, which means I can sit back on Saturday and just watch them all.
Watch it all.
Great. So listen, lads, have a great weekend. Enjoy it all. And we'll be back on Monday to review all the action. We will talk to you then.
Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.